Hello, folks. Welcome to the Land Tamer stream. It's Friday, y'all, and I started my weekend early. I actually have the day off, so that's why the only reason I'm streaming on a Friday. That's normally my night off from streaming. But hey, we're here. We got 3 days to go till my exam. As a matter of fact, right at 3 days ago, because I'm taking it at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, July 23rd. So I'm gonna just kind of put you in my frame of mind right now and my plan. What does someone do 3 days before a big exam like this, right? What is a good effective strategy, right? So I'm going to go over that again. Many of you familiar with that. I've talked about that, but it changes day to day sometimes as you adapt and learn and figure out what you're doing or what you're not doing, as a lot of times in my case. But anyway, this wallpaper of the day, this is a throwback. It was on NASA's Image of the Day site. 49 years ago today, man stepped on another planet. And this is Buzz Aldrin, I believe, who's carrying the first experiment kit on the moon. Pretty exciting stuff, guys. And all I'm trying to do is pass an exam. Look what these folks are doing. Yeah, don't mind the chat. I was just playing with Nightbot there a little bit. Making sure that some of my commands are still accurate and working. Yeah. So anyway, don't expect a lot of people on stream today because, again, this is an odd time. Most people expect me a certain time during the weekdays. But let's talk a little bit about strategies. So written exam, like I said, I did the title here. It's not really clickbait. I did reschedule the exam, but not for a different day. I just changed it from 10:15 to 1:30. I think 10:15 was one of the earliest times before that this site was available, but I was looking this morning at the distance to the site from my house and, where it's located, traffic, etc. I'm like, I just wasn't feeling real comfortable at 10:15, although it should have been fine. I decided to give myself just a little more breathing room so there's no pressure at all. And generally I have a day of exam sort of pattern. I've taken a number of these things now over the years. I generally like to, leave home early, very early, and go have lunch or coffee or breakfast or whatever the case may be near where the testing location is. So I plan to continue that tradition that I have with this. So that way I can, do a little last minute review. I can have some coffee. I can get caffeined up or whatever, drink some water, make sure that I'm comfortable going into the exam. And I know I'm probably overanalyzing this, right? This is, my dad would tell me I can be very anal retentive about details sometimes, but hey, it's what it is. So I need to feel comfortable. I need to feel focused. And that's what I plan to do. So I plan to go check in. You're supposed to be early. There's, whenever you reschedule, Pearson VUE sends you an email with some reminders, which are good reminders. One, you need 2 forms of ID. Friday stream. Yeah, mentors. Good to have you, my friend. It's a great Friday. It's already rained this morning. It rained last night. We've had quite a bit of rain here in Central Florida, but I like it. It's calming to the nerves, I think. But yeah, make sure you have 2 forms of ID. This caught me a little off guard at Cisco Live because I don't know why. I just wasn't sure what kind of ID they needed. I don't always have my credit card signed like I should. And I had to do that. Like in line at Cisco Live, the long line, I was asking around, does anybody have a pen? My credit card's not signed because it's supposed to have your signature. 2 forms of ID with signature. One of them has to be a government ID with a photo. No problem, right? Driver's license. It's the other one that I was like, ooh. So I don't want to be caught off guard by that. Sometimes when I go to an exam, you know how you go to an exam, and at least a lot of them that I've been to, they'll ask you to, you got to take everything out of your pockets. It hasn't been it wasn't that strict as Cisco Live, I don't think. I mean, they did sort of ask you to check your pockets, which I understand security. There's a lot of cheaters, right? But that's why sometimes if I'm driving from home to a site, oftentimes I won't take my whole wallet. I won't take I'll take like just the keys I need. Like I'm streamlined. So that's just a reminder to me today, don't forget, I'm just going to take my whole wallet. If they make me put it in a locker, that's cool. I don't care. I just want to make sure that they don't give me any issues with my ID. So I'm going to have 2 forms ID, and it's good to get to a site early. A lot of times they'll let you start early for written exam, right? I mean, almost always. If you're there early and the seat's available, which it usually is because they have buffer time, you can start early, and that's fine with me. So I plan to get there 15 minutes early, which means I did a search. This is my typical tradition. I found a coffee shop nearby where they have, light snacks. And I always, like around here, I try to do something that I haven't been to before. Make it, it's my day off. I haven't always had to take a day off when taking an exam. Sometimes, exams that weren't this long. I've taken some exams that were 60, 90 minutes. My boss had let me, just take the time from work. And they were paying for the exams sometimes, so it wasn't a big deal. But for this big of an exam, I've got the whole day off. So the Bizzle's in the house. Q, does your stream topics come from what you're studying for? Yes, they do, DeBizzle. So that's a good question. How am I coming up with topics? I will cover that here in a minute. That's a good question, yeah. And this has evolved in the last couple of weeks, to be honest. So I want to go over that too. Good, appreciate you guys' interest. But yeah, just to wrap up, so Monday I have the day off, so I'm going to make a little fun of it. I love coffee shops. I love coffee. In Nashville, man, we had so many good coffee shops. They're a little sparse around here in Orlando. As if you've ever been to Orlando, you know that this is the land of tourism and chains. So I haven't had a lot of time to explore and find mom and pops. But anyway, I found a mom and pop coffee shop nearby. I want to do that. I'm going to get there around 11:30. Means I need to leave house. I'm working my way backwards on my schedule, so I got plenty of buffer time. Get there at 11, take care of business, have a coffee, do a little last-minute studying. Hopefully I know it's going to be real close to the site. Wrap up, around 1. Head over that way, and we're good to go. So that's one thing that's off my mind is my schedule. I know exactly what's going to happen on that day. I'm not going to the gym that day. Generally, I wake up at 5:30. I did not do it this morning either, just because I've got this. I'm so focused. I got this on my mind, so I just slept in. I had a great, my sleep app says I got like 80 percentile on my sleep, quality sleep. So that's good. That's the main thing I'm aiming for. And anyway, it's funny. Like this may seem excessive, like I'm doing a lot of preparation for an exam like this, but it's really important to me. I've known people who have gone from like a consulting engagement, left it last minute, rushed off to take their exam, pass it, come back. That's great. I need a little more, I guess, opportunities for success is what I'm aiming for, right? Taking care of all the details. Anyway, good question by DeBizzle. What topics am I covering? So these are things that I have studied like today or last night. And what I've been doing is I was encouraged to do this by Tony E., Show IP Interface Brief. He has some really good quality stuff on his YouTube channel. And all along, this stream has been about vlogging the journey. And it is that, but I don't know, it might be morphing a little bit. I want to give a little more content to viewers who are, not just interested in, maybe you're on a journey also and you're looking for ideas or tips or just to kind of see what other people are doing, which is great. But I'm also trying to include some nuggets in here for, one, to bolster my own understanding of a topic, kind of as an insurance policy that, yes, I do kind of know this because I'm able to explain it coherently. And the other is to offer people who are viewing this either live or on the YouTube channel just some bits that they can even go back later, do a search and might find some snippets in here that might be of use in perpetuity, So the topics I come up with are, let me just kind of go over my strategy right now. So my plan, 3 days out, And that's going to lead into the topics question. I know I'm kind of beating around the bush, but my plan has been, review material in boson, flashcards, and, over this last month. Actually, I will say my strategy was strategy all along since June 10th, the last fail, was phase 1, review, fail, study, fail notes, and learn those topics. Now I'm in phase 2, which is review, boson flashcards, and cert guide memory table materials. And identify problem areas, dig into those problem areas until a reasonable level. So that's what I'm doing. And as I hit these areas, and right now I'm on the boson, I've done some flashcards, some cert guide. That's what I just intend to do for the next, 3 days. I'm getting close to finishing my review of the boson, which is 500 questions. I'm on close to question 400. So I got a little ways to go. Heck, I may not get there by Monday, and I'm okay with that. I'm at peace with this, folks. That's one thing I've come to realize, that this is a journey. This is a long journey. It's going to be quite a journey for me, including passing the exam. So this is just one step. I'm going into this not thinking that there's a lot on the line to pass, so that I don't pressure myself a lot. I already have plan B, which is if I don't pass this time, I'm taking it again at the end of August. So, it's cool. Achieve coolness. Serenity now, serenity of mind. That was part of the exam, I think, mentally, in the mental war, where I lost at the last one. Because I let myself get, I'd built up the expectation too much. And I felt like there was a lot on the line, and, I wasn't taking it in stride. And I think that the initial shock kind of set me back a little bit. It may have cost me the 54 points, whatever it is. I don't know. But this time, I'm going to have a completely different mental game. I think that's going to be, hopefully, what makes a difference. And, of course, that's very important for the lab as well. Everyone's told me that. For the lab, it is going to play tricks on your brain. It's going to try to cut you down mentally, emotionally. Don't let it do that. And that's what I'm really working on right now. My mental game, right? The mental fight. So anyway, with that in mind, getting to what you asked originally, DeBizzle, is that as I've been going along, I've been hitting some of these topics where, like, okay, I may have even got the question right, but I felt like I got it correct, but for the wrong reason. Not because I understood it really well, right? Just from repetition. So that's why I got these two topics today that I wanted to go over, because I wanted to cover these. And one is ospf timers. And I probably should have put in here LSA timers, because there's a lot of timers with any routing protocol, right? I mean, when you look at routing protocols, time is of the essence, right? In any really operation on a router. Router's a computer. Computer's time-based. Much of the operation is based on clock cycles. And, especially with a protocol or a function that is maintaining state, that has a state machine, like OSPF, you could think of it in principal terms as a state machine. That is maintaining a lot of different information. So, of course, timers are important, and in this case, these are really LSA timers. And when you look at all the different commands in the Cisco documentation for LSA timers, there's quite a few that are relevant to that. And I just wanted to go over these, distinguish them, and talk about them a little bit so that we know what they are, what they do. Don't necessarily have to have them memorized, but just kind of understand what they're doing and why you might use them. So first, we have timers, throttle, LSA, SPF command. And I kind of put these in order, I think, of sort of the LSA process. When I say process, I mean from SPF calculation to sending the LSA out the interface. There's a couple of interim steps there, right? And a couple of clocks or timers. One is the SPF calculations. SPF, shortest path first. This, of course, is a Dijkstra algorithm calculating shortest path. And generally, this is turned off, but you can throttle this process. Obviously, this can be, well, without a throttle, it means that anytime there is a condition that will prompt the SPF calculations to run, the router is going to run the SPF calculations. So, I mean, there could be one link that goes down and another that goes down 1 millisecond later. All right. SPF is it's not going to hold back from calculating those changes, but you can throttle that. And this could be useful in different scenarios where you have lots of changes, or you have processor limitations on an old router. I mean, it's a knob that's not turned by default, but you can turn it on and turn the knob, right? Then you have, after SPF calculation, you have LSA generation. And there is a throttle for that. Timers, throttle, LSA, all. As you can see, throttle here is a word that's coming up. And then that is, of course, SPF has run, and OSPF has determined that it needs to generate a new link state advertisement or advertisements. So it's going to begin generating these LSA packets, right? That it will then advertise to its neighbors, or to the interfaces that it knows it needs to flood these LSAs to. You can throttle that process as well if you want to. And there are 3 different values here, I think. So, I mean, I don't think it's critical to know I hope it's not critical to know for the written what those values are and why you would ever tweak them. In fact, Cisco in the documentation warns you, generally you don't want to play with these numbers. It's kind of like spanning tree timers. You can change them. No one is going to stop you from changing them. In your lab, they might, in production, the change control board might stop you, or a peer, or your boss. But you can configure it. Doesn't mean you necessarily have to. It's good to know the steps of the process, though, I think, right? So then there's there's 3 timers pacing commands. So SPF has run. It has generated these LSA update packets, and now it has to flood them or advertise them out its interfaces, the interfaces that it needs to go out. And there are 3 different commands for that control it, right? Flood, so there's a certain pace for flooding. And then there's the LSA group. Now, the LSA group is a feature of OSPF, like BGP. BGP has a similar feature. I believe EIGRP does as well, where, OSPF has to determine, all right, I need to send LSAs to, let's see, I need this neighbor and that neighbor. And what it can do is, when processing this, it could kind of group neighbors together in a sense that it knows, all right, when I generate a new LSA and I flood it, this same LSA, I'm going to have to make a copy of it to this interface, that interface, right? I'm just going to flood it out all 3 at the same time. That's an LSA group, and you can pace how often that occurs. And then there's retransmission. So we know that with OSPF, I think I'm saying this right. Let me check. And what I'm thinking about here is acknowledgments. I know EIGRP uses them. Oh, here's Cisco studies. I'm just randomly Googling here. Yes, it does require acknowledgement. That's what I thought. I know EIGRP does, and EIGRP has a special field for those. So yeah, OSPF, if it does not receive an acknowledgement after a certain time, it's going to also retransmit that LSA packet to a neighbor, right? You can control the pacing for all of that. Again, same. This is getting really deep. I mean, this is where you are, for example, an environment, maybe you rely heavily upon OSPF, you have constrained resources, or you just have a very, very large topology or environment, which, can happen. Service provider network, a very large enterprise network, or if you have, for example, I've interviewed at places like this before where retail, and they just have so many remote sites. Like, let's say you have a central headquarters, and then you have 4,000 stores, tying into a couple of distribution points. Well, you probably don't want to have really expensive routers at all those. So you might have very small amounts of memory or CPU. You're trying to save money so that you can have a greater distribution of retail presence, right? Retail space. So you may not have big routers. And this could be limitations that you just want to control as a standard. Who knows? I'm just trying to think of different uses of why you would want to tweak things like something like this. You could have a scenario where you're having all sorts of issues or processing problems, and a few little tweaks could make all the difference, right? So at least we have the knobs if we need them. Then we had this one, timer LSA arrival. Now, this is a different part of the process. This is processing inbound LSAs. So up until now, we've been talking about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different commands related to LSAs and LSA processing for outbound. You can also tune the processing of inbound LSA updates. And this is turned on by default. A lot of these features are not. This one is. So, for example, you could set the minimum interval for accepting the same LSA. So let's say you have a neighbor that he is, for some reason, he's got a flap, or I don't know. He's sending you the same LSA over and over. Or maybe there's a burst of LSAs coming in at the same time, and some of those are being processed. It's the same LSA updates coming in. By default, if that happens within 1,000 milliseconds, basically OSPF is going to discard it. It's going to disregard it. It's going to say, okay, this has got to be a duplicate. There's no reason for me to process this. You can lengthen that interval from 1 second to, more than a second. So those are some OSPF LSA timers. In depth, yeah. OSPF has a lot of knobs. You have to be honest. It can get, for an IGP, it can get complicated for sure. In my view, even more complicated than EIGRP. They're mowing outside my window. Hope you don't hear that. It doesn't seem to be. All right, so moving on to the next topic, guys, and then we're going to wrap it up and get back to studying. I kind of murdered this yesterday. Like, I went over it very briefly, but I tripped up a little bit on the PIR, and so I felt like I owed it to the stream to come back and just do a do-over. And it's for my own understanding too, right? So when you talk about policing, let's just go over this one more time, right? I think where I got confused is on the single rate 3 color, but we're going to go over that again. And in general, you have 3 options for policing. You have single rate, 2 color, and this is the drill sheet, by the way, which I will put here. I should give the drill sheet its own Nightbot command. Yeah, I can do that. So for policing, you have single rate 2-color, single rate 3-color, and then 2-rate 3-color. And again, the rates have to do with rates that you are monitoring and calculating against. So essentially, your rate is equivalent to a token bucket. All right. So as you know, if you watched the video yesterday from Kevin Wallace, you'll know what the buckets are and what they're for. He used the cup and he cut into the cup, and talked about how that illustrates a token bucket. But essentially, what happens is a rate is specified, and I need to pull this up in the. Let's pull this up in the Cisco command window. I don't know these by heart. Let's see here. I think I just had this up. Just one moment here. Okay, this is a link I posted yesterday. But this actually has some configuration examples, right? Okay. So what we have here, let's break this down. And this, we'll cover the, it might be easier to cover 2-rate 3-color and go from there. So here's a sample command, and we'll break this down. All right, here's the entire command. Let's see if we can, how we can do this. Make it a little bigger. It's too big. Okay. And then I'm going to have a word of caution about this after we sort of go over it, right? So let's break down this command. You have the police command, CIR, okay? This is the committed information rate. All right, this is what you're promised. Let's say you have a service provider and they have connected your router with to their router, and they're using a gigabit Ethernet connection. So, and your port is configured for 1 gigabit per second, right? Doesn't mean you're getting a gigabit of throughput. Let's say that your provider has promised you a committed information, and you have paid for a committed information rate of 100 megabits per second, right? So that's what this first figure is. And this is bits, so that's 500 kilobits per second is what this is. I believe I'm right on that. Yeah, this is in bits per second. Okay, so that's not a lot. Yeah, 1 kilobit, 500 kilobits per second. Yeah. So it's not a lot, but this is what you are guaranteed, right? And when the policing command is used, and remember, a lot of times this is configured by the service provider. So in this case, you might use shaping on your egress interface, but your provider is going to be using policing on the ingress interface. So they're going to be monitoring what you're using, and they're going to monitor it and police it, and then they're going to use a token bucket. Well, first of all, I guess maybe we should cover. Let's carry on. Okay. Let's look at the command here. This is not going to take 2 seconds to cover, guys. This is going to take a minute. Trying to remember, BC is conform. Okay, yeah, bytes conform. All right, so here's what's going to happen, right? Is if, or no, is that? Let's look it up. Let's go to our Cisco documentation. I don't want to tell you wrong, and I need to know it myself. I know what that number does, but I need to be sure I know what BC represents, right? So let's go to QoS, command reference, P. You see I've already been here. Okay, police. All right, BC, I don't know why. I think that's because it is BC, which is conforms to burst. And it is bytes conform burst. This is B for bytes, and this is conform. So in other words, we're setting a sort of a threshold here. All right, we're committing to 500 kilobits per second. But we know that the customer is probably going to go over, right? So what do we do in this case? Well, we're going to set up another threshold here, which is burst conform. And then we have BE. Oh, sorry. You know, we should do single rate first. Yeah, that was a bad idea. Let's go back up. Police. Okay. So let's see an example. I thought that was bytes, but it is burst conform. Okay. So let's do this here. That's our, this is our dual or 2-rate 3-color police example. All right, this is our single rate. We'll start with a 2-color. And the example command used here is this. All right, and what this means, so here's our CIR. Our first command is this, part of the command is CIR, which is committed information rate. And I'm going to go up here so I'll tell you correctly this time. Okay. Average rate in bits per second. Valid values are 8 to 128 gigabits per second. So this is pretty small. Our committed rate, our CIR in this example, is 8 kilobits per second. All right, then we have two options. Burst normal burst size. Okay, and then the maximum burst size. This is a 2-color, so we're only going to use one of these figures here, which is 1,000. Now notice, this is in bytes. Okay? So we've got two thresholds here. We've got our committed rate, 8 kilobits per second. And then while we're monitoring that, as long as that conforms to 8 kilobits per second, we're good. Traffic is going to be forwarded. We can allow the customer to exceed that traffic, however, right? Or burst. And a lot of circuits you get, it makes sense for a service provider, right? They over provision like everyone else, just like you do on a LAN or in the data center. You over provision capacity, and there's no reason to let a lot of that capacity based on committed information rates and guarantees. That's great, but there's no reason to let the leftover traffic or capacity to just sit there. So you have burstable rates. You often will advertise or allow customers to burst over their committed rate. I'm going to guarantee you 8 kilobits per second, but I'm going to allow you to burst up to 1,000 bytes. That's the burst size. Okay. So even past the committed rate, you can still send 1,000 bytes. And that's going to be monitored using the token system, right? The bucket and the tokens. We're going to assign tokens. We're going to put tokens in the bucket up to 8 kilobits per second, and we're going to put an additional equivalent of 1,000 bytes of tokens in the bucket for bursting, okay? So we really have three thresholds here, right? We have a CIR, we have an exceed rate, or a burst rate, and then we have whatever's left past that. There is a name for it, by the way. I don't remember what that is. But anyway, that's your transmission rate, essentially, on the line. So there's a couple things we can decide to do for the customer. Obviously, if they're within their committed rate, we forward the traffic. This could be service provider. This could be enterprise traffic as well, right? So you could be making this decision as to what to do. But there's another set of actions, however, that you can take on the burst rate. So when someone conforms to the burst rate, in other words, they're sending more traffic than the committed information rate. They're bursting, but they're not bursting above the allowed burst rate. That's what these actions allow you to do, right? You can say here, let's see. Yeah, conform and exceed. So conform action generally could be, I think, what's the command here? Transmit, yeah. So when they conform, we're just going to transmit. You could do something else. Let's say you're wanting to adjust some, you're at an egress point where you want to adjust, or you want to mark the packets such that all these packets were conforming. And we're going to mark it with CS4, something like that you could do. But generally, you're going to have transmit. Now, what happens when I exceed the CIR? That's where you have the exceed action command, right? And this is two color. So we're not talking about violate yet. We're just talking about exceed. And in this case, you have a decision to make. So these are all the actions that you can take when someone exceeds the committed information rate. You can say, I'm just going to drop the packet, right? Or I'm going to set the DSCP and then transmit. Set the MPLS, experimental imposition bits, and transmit, right? Or just transmit the packet. So you have these decisions to make. And I'm thinking in this case, all right, let's look at this one. This example. Okay, an example, ignition token bus starts full of 1,000 bytes. If a 450 byte packet arrives, the packet conforms because enough bytes are available to conform. The conform action send is taken by. If the next packet arrives 0.25 seconds later, 2 are bytes added to the token bucket, leaving 800 bytes. If the next packet is 900 bytes, the packet exceeds, and the exceed action is taken. No bytes are taken from the token bucket. Okay. Okay, so it looks like this value is not a burst. Check here. Where'd my command go? Thought I had a window open with a command. Did I close it? Shoot. Police. Average rate normal burst. Default normal burst size is 1,500. Okay, so in this particular case, we have, with two color, there is just normal and burst, right? So many windows. Yes, we have normal and burst. And really in this case, those are the only two thresholds you can work with, right? That's a two color. We've got normal and burst. And in this case, what I've decided to do is, as long as they conform, I'm going to transmit. And if it exceeds, then we're going to drop. And this is really telling, these two figures here are telling the policer the committed information rate and how to allocate the tokens. All right. Now, three color. One rate, three color policer example. And let me see if they have one here. Actually, you know what, guys? This link, this meat chunk, this was a very simple explanation. I really liked it. Routing null zero. Okay, yeah, they've got examples here. Yeah, single rate, two color, if you do the show policy map interface. Okay, then you have single rate, three color, right? As you can see here, single rate, three color supports the concept's idea of a BC committed burst and an excess burst. So that's the difference, right? You've got your, you're still monitoring only one rate. So you can say police. What's the example used here? I'd like this example. 512000, which would be 512 kilobits per second. And then the other part of the example is police CIR, conform action, seed action, violate action. This must be using a default value in his example. So that's not really good for us. We want to see... I'm losing my windows here, folks. That's 2 rates. Let's just go to the command. There we go. Okay, so we still have our single rate. And this is where we would have the burst max, right? Default varies by platform. Okay. So there is a default here of 1500. And this default varies by platform. But let's just imagine 3 values here. So the burst amount might be 1500 bytes. And let's say the burst max is 3000 bytes. Okay, still a single rate. But now we have 3 different thresholds, right? We have 512 kilobits per second as the rate. And then we have the burst. This is when bursting starts, or exceeding. And then we have an upper threshold of bytes to use in the bucket. Now here's where we have basically 3 options. So as long as they're conforming, right, we can transmit, we can do whatever we want. If they exceed, but not violate, so this is called exceeding, and this is violating. Harsh words. So let's say you tell a customer, all right, you get 512K, we're going to allow you to burst up to, and we could convert this to bits per second, right? That's the thing you have to be real careful about when you see this on the command line. Remember to do your conversion. So we're going to allow you to exceed up to this rate. Once you go over that rate, we may drop it, okay? That is what 3-color means. And oftentimes this would be like green, exceed would be yellow, and violating even the burstable rate puts you in the red. And oftentimes the service provider is going to, the action they will take, because you can do exceed action, drop, or you could do marking, DSCP, transmit, right? So we're going to remark the traffic, give it a lower priority, and then we're going to transmit, and then violate action is drop. That's a 3-color policer. Okay. I had that really pretty much all up until yesterday when I got to this, which is the 2-color, or the 2-rate 3-color policer. So now we essentially have the same sort of 3 actions. But instead, we're going to closely monitor not just the committed or the rate of traffic coming into the committed bucket, but we're also going to monitor the rate that traffic is spilling into the burst bucket. And the burst bucket is going to have its own token bucket, right, for allocation. So it's a little more granular. You can do more fine tuning. You know, in this, in the single rate 3-color, you're only monitoring a single bucket closely, right? In the 2-rate 3-color policer, you're monitoring 2 buckets, and that's the committed information rate, and you define that, right? This is our example we started with. Police CIR, this many bits per second, and this is the conform. Then you have the peak information rate. So this is how far above the committed information rate. This is where the other token bucket starts. And this is how many bytes are used to calculate the tokens for that bucket. Then we have the same three actions: conform action, transmit, exceed action, set the IP precedence, and then transmit to 2, and then the violate action is drop. All right. I'm not going to try to explain the whole bucket calculation. I don't know that I could, and how that is calculated. There's some math there. I don't know that that is necessarily extremely important for the written, maybe for the lab, but for now, that's what we got, folks. So, wow, it's taking a while. But it's good. It's all good stuff. It's time well invested. I would encourage you to check out. This has a good explanation. It doesn't go into a lot of detail, but I like it because it has some good illustrations and illustrates those different features. And again, beware of bits versus bytes when you're looking at that calculation, Why they do that, I don't know. Why don't they use the same unit of measurement when you're doing the configuration? I probably am not as expert enough to be able to rationalize that, right? But anyway, there it is. And then I got one piece of trivia for you folks. If you're interested, Show encouraged me to do this, is to just throw out some trivia, and we'll talk about this tomorrow on the stream. Hopefully I'll stream at noon tomorrow, around there. But yeah, folks, just think about, what is the acronym MOS? Do you know what that acronym is? And if you do, briefly describe the technology, right? And its importance to the CCIE blueprint and networking in general, right? So if you know that, right, see if you can figure it out or explain it without Googling it. And let me know tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll go over it. All right, folks, thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Appreciate all the support. Got so much great support from the community. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here and get back to hitting it hard. Probably go warm up some coffee and get settled in and do another, nice long session of hardcore study and reviewing. Hopefully I'll get through all the boson questions today. That's my goal. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it. Have a good Friday. Whether you're spending time with family or doing some R&R, as long as you got your plans. I'm sure you made plans, right, for your cert journey, whether you're labbing, studying, watching some videos, some streams. Hey, maybe watch a little bit of my stream again tomorrow. Stay tuned in. Hopefully be around noon. We do have some stuff planned. We're supposed to go to a party that involves it's a dress-up party, like we're going on a cruise. So I'm going to take a little time off tomorrow evening and spend some time with the fam and hang out, maybe have a few some liquid refreshments. That'll be a good break for me, because by then I'll be ready for break. But we'll try to stream around noon. Take care, folks. Thanks again for all the support. We shall see you back here soon in the Land Tamer stream. 3 days ago.